Well, welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. This is episode 10 of Qatsyr Harvest. Once again, I'm a sole proprietor as we try to both produce this live stream for you and host it as well. The place we left off in our last program on Qatsyr Harvest was fairly profound. I was speaking from the heart to tell Yah's beloved people that it was time, after 3,000 years of erasing Yahweh's name, of telling him to go away and not speak directly to you again. And considering all that has transpired since that time, 3,400 years ago, it's time. It's time to change. If you think that doing the same thing over and over again, as you have for 34 centuries, is going to produce a different result, open your eyes and look around you. Look, as the world has turned vastly more anti-Semitic over these last few years than the conditions that existed in the 1920s in Europe. This is now a global expression of hatred against God's people. This is now the entire religion of 2 billion people wanting your annihilation, the extermination of the state of Israel. This isn't one country. This isn't one political party. Now you're fighting for your very existence, for your right to live, Israel. And over the past 3,400 years, you've tried to rely on your own recognizance. You've chosen to be religious. You've chosen to be political. You've chosen to isolate yourselves. And to a large extent, you've deceived yourselves. You're running out of time to continue to play those cards. And it's a losing hand. It's been a losing hand for 34 centuries since you told Yahweh to go away and to shut up because you didn't want to hear directly from him again. Well, in the meantime, Yahweh chose a leader among your people. The one man that Yahweh publicly announces that from all others, he chose this one man. A boy at the time, and that he anointed him 3 times, symbolic of his 3 lives. And that this one man, Yahweh said, I am his father. He is my son. He is, of course, your Messiah. He was your king and will be your king again. And so it is with this man, about 400 years after the Exodus, that Yahweh united Yisrael, brought Yisrael into its eternal capital, Yahweh's home, Jerusalem, cleared the threshing floor of Mount Moriah for the presence of the home for Yahweh's name. And it was during those years that David became the most powerful of prophets. It is when he wrote the first 30 Mizmor, Psalms, in which he revealed to us that he had decided on his own recognizance based upon everything he had read and heard from Yahweh, that he would volunteer to serve as the Passover lamb. And we read in these first 30 Mizmor, God concurring with Dod's decision, knowing that it was the right call, knowing he was not only the best person to serve in this role, he was the only one. And collectively, they decided to do so, and Dod would write first-person accounts as a prophet of what he would endure 1,000 years later, in year 4000 33 CE, as he was subjected corporeally to abuse beyond our imagination by the beast of Rome in fulfilling Pesach, to open the doorway to life and to heaven for you, Israel. But he went far beyond this. Dod had agreed to have his nefesh soul, our guilt, with him into Sheol, where he spent matzah, depositing it there, never to be seen again, and therefore making us appear perfect in Yahweh's eyes, perfecting the covenant family, as the second condition, the covenant requires that we walk to Yahweh along the path he has provided, so that he can perfect us. Father and Son did this on our behalf on Pesach and Matzah. The result was Bikurim, where Yahweh's firstborn, his Bakor, led the way for us to become part of Bikurim, the firstborn children, where we are enriched and empowered by our presence within God's covenant family. This makes it possible for us to participate in this upcoming Shabuah harvest. But this is the part of the story, Israel, that you have missed. You don't know your Messiah. You are unaware of the true identity of the Son of God. You do not know what occurred in the 80th Yobel year of 33 CE. And that is because the following 2 Yobels actually thereafter, in 133, the founder of Judaism, Rabbi Akiba, foisted another false Messiah to counter the false Messiah that had been used as a crude counterfeit to steal all of the achievements and accolades that Yahweh had ascribed to his son, Dod. Your religion was born out of a second wrong regarding a false Messiah somehow being right. But you didn't learn from that, even though it led directly to the diaspora, which ultimately culminated in the pogroms and in the Holocaust. You learned nothing from it. It's time that you wake up. Follow a different course of action. Stop erasing Yahweh's name. Stop telling him to go away, that you don't want to hear from him again. Start listening to him, which you can do through this program. For reasons that are long and complex, 23 years ago, God chose me to be his voice, to address you and call you home. That is why these programs exist. That is why I turn on these lights and this camera and do these live streams for you, for this particular purpose. It is why I am compassionate and know that this is difficult for you to process. As Jews, you have been lied to for a very long time by those that you have chosen to trust. Your rabbis and your politicians. And they have led you to a horrible place. And I'm here to tell you, Israel, it's going to get much worse. You're now just 15 months from entering the time of Israel's troubles, where the greatest atrocities in the history of the world will be perpetrated. This will culminate with the Towrah ingathering, the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, a reenactment of what Eliah did now 2,888 years prior, when he lambasted and bested the entire religious and political establishment of Israel. He will do so again. And Yahweh will respond as he did on that day, but even more magnificently. An immortal remnant of Israel will be spared for Yahweh's homecoming 10 days later on Yom Kippurim. And it will occur as the sun sets in Jerusalem, 6:22 p.m. on October 2nd, 2033, year 6000 Yom Kippurim, where 5 days later, the earth will be transformed and we will enter the Gan Eden once again. You don't have very many opportunities. See that menorah over my shoulder? The first 3 have already been fulfilled. You missed them. The next is approaching very swiftly. And the last 3 will be your last opportunities to get right with God. And they will all transpire between now and 8.5 years from now, in year 6000 2033. Time to change. It's time to recognize that the advice that you have been given, whether it be from academia, from Judaism, from the media, from your politicians, has led you astray. It's led you to a very horrible place. And it's been horrible for a very long time. Now, ever since Solomon decided that, that more women were better than one good woman, and chose to spend his time with lots of women from foreign cultures, and then appeased them by adopting their religious practices, Israel splintered. It broke apart. Israel, from that point on, has been political and religious, as opposed to adhering to the stipulations of the covenant, which there are 5, and I don't think there's 5 Jews in all of Israel that know what those 5 conditions are, or that know that the first 3 Moed Mikre that Dode fulfilled, which is something you're also ignorant of, enables the 5 benefits of the covenant. And so my message to you is, it's time to recognize that life has been particularly difficult for Israel in the face of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians multiple times, the Macedonian Greeks, Imperial Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. The first Muslims, as they wiped out 1/3 of the earth's population following the war of compulsion upon Muhammad's death, recognizing that previously they had exterminated all of the Jews of Arabia in an act of genocide. Of course, was followed by the Ottoman Turks, and then by European Christians as they ravaged the Jewish people, leading ultimately to the Nazification of Europe and the Holocaust, And following that now, a systematic onslaught by Islam, the most anti-Semitic religion in the history of humankind. One, by the way, that would not exist if your rabbis had not sold Talmud readings to Muhammad. They betrayed you when Rabbi Akiva foisted a false messiah, that of Bar Kokhba, from which you get your six-pointed star, on you, that brought the wrath of Roman legions and Hadrian upon the land where he renamed Judea Philistia. Yes, the founder of Judaism brought this upon you. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were crucified, killed. Many, many more were hauled off as slaves. You have been your own worst enemy. And there is no enemy to Jews that has been harder on Jews than Judaism, right from the onset. And to counter it, many Jews, probably an equal number to those who are Haredim, have become extreme progressives, the most liberal of liberals. And today, progressivism has become a religious conspiratorial cult. And like all conspiracies, like all religions, evidence and reason no longer matter. And it's political platitudes that drive the motivations, the speech, the actions, the responses. And for the most part, they are thoughtless. It is telling in this regard that the overwhelming preponderance of those who were abducted and who suffered under the Islamic assault against Israel on 10/7/23 were extreme liberals. The young people at the rave were hardly conservatives, nor were their parents. And those who reside in kibbutzim, which was the other primary victim of that Islamic attack, are largely socialists. Nothing wrong with being liberal or a socialist in terms of it's no worse than any other political or religious affinity. They're all wrong. But in this case, the story is telling. And the reason the story is telling is because it is and has been the extreme liberals within Israeli culture, community, that have wanted to accommodate Islam, that want to give a state to the Muslims, that brought these Muslims into their homes and onto their farms because they thought that they could all be happy together. We could all get along. We could love one another. And look what happened to you. And because it's difficult to teach someone who has gone full left, I know that's camera right, but my left hand, to learn from their own mistakes rather than acknowledge that they were wrong, that evil cannot be accommodated, that Islam cannot be accommodated, particularly when they were the most victimized by that assault. Rather than blame Islam for abducting and holding loved ones, the extended families and those who rallied around them as liberal and even more liberal, blamed the conservative government, the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu, for the captives being held. Sure, it was insane. But when you're dealing with politics of this sort or religion, sanity is never in the equation. Rather than blaming Islam, they blame the conservative government of Israel, sought to bring it down rather than Islam down. And now worldwide, you have probably 1 billion progressives, extreme liberals throughout the United States, South America, Europe, who are championing Muslims, the perpetrators, the rapists, the pedophiles, the mass murderers, the ones who abducted innocent civilians and then starved them, tortured them, raped them, and have sought to shame and victimize the victims all the more. It's a world that's upside down. You cannot reason with it. And so if you don't remove yourself from this, if you don't come clean from progressive politics, which is exceedingly popular among Jews, and you don't come clean from Judaism, which of course is the religion most popular among Jews, there's no hope. By saying these things, do not mistake for a moment that I am somehow have a political bias and that I'm advocating for MAGA or for some political party that is right-wing. I am not. I have followed Yahowah's advice, and I am apolitical. I point out the flaws on both sides of that political debate. And in Israel in particular, I am disgusted that you can't even form a constitution, that you have no checks and balance on your judiciary, that you have a government that uses the parliamentary system, which is the government of bribes, and that the current government is formed because of an alliance with religious parasites. So I'm no fan of your politics on either side of the aisle. And as those know who have spent any time around me, who have looked at the books on the bookshelf, not only behind me, but on YAHOWAH.com, you know that I have written 36 books. And you know of those 36 books that 13 of them are uniquely anti-religious. 5 destroy the credibility of the religion of Islam, the first ever to reorder the Quran chronologically, to set it into the context of Muhammad's life, to present the entire Quran in the proper order, explained through the oldest and most credible hadith sources, so that you can know exactly who Muhammad and Allah are, and the horrid life that they lived, and why Islam is a terrorist manifesto and a death cult that was perpetrated by a rapist and a pedophile, mass murdering terrorist. It's all proven, all irrefutable. I've received thousands of death threats for having written it to protect Israel. I wrote it on behest of God Almighty, who specifically asked me to do so for you. At the same time, I've written 5 volumes disproving the Christian New Testament. It's impossible to read Twistianity and remain a Christian. And I did so not only because Christianity is the most popular lie being believed today, but because it is that lie, Peter and Paul's false Messiah, their crude counterfeit that buried the accolades and achievements of Dowd, so that the world did not know what he had done until I revealed it just a matter of a few years ago. That he is the Messiah and Son of God who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And so I've cleared away that religious rubbish through Twistianity, and I've written another 3 volumes to disprove Judaism. Doing so by absolutely eviscerating the large swaths of the books written in Babel, Daniel, and Ezekiel. So I'm not coming at this because I have a religious prejudice other than, like God, I despise all of them. I don't come at this with a political prejudice to garner some favor because, like God, I despise all political parties. I come to you as the voice of God. This is your last call, Israel. Your God still loves you. He chose you, and he isn't going to change. But in all of this time, you've never chosen him in return, and that must change. On this note, I'd like to continue with where we were in our last program of Qatsyr harvest, because there's a lot to accomplish, and there's not a lot of time left to accomplish it. So it's time we get down to business. On this particular day, Shabuah, God revealed that there's a lot to celebrate and a great deal to share. And there's no better way to observe this day than to read and to recite what the Torah and prophets reveal about it. It's time that we invite those who are estranged from Yahweh to come home. If ever a day was esteemed, well, from Yahweh's point of view, there are several that are esteemed, meaning essential. I would normally have been surprised that Shabuah would be among them. Yes, I understand that matzah is esteemed. It is essential. It is the day that Rabbinic Judaism and the culture of the Jews has completely forgotten. They have turned Passover into a 7-day celebration, recognizing that according to Yahweh, the day that is essential is matzah, that the entire celebration is Chag matzah, not Chag Passover. Passover is just the first day of Chag matzah. And that by saying these things, the message is that eternal life, which is what one gains through Dode's fulfillment of Passover, is counterproductive without unyeasting our souls of religious and political corruption during matzah, making matzah the most essential day of all. This leads, of course, to Bikurim, and Shabuah is a Bikurim harvest. And so we've already talked about what are the things that make Shabuah essential. Since it's really Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, I view would be essential. And of course, the ultimate fulfillment of Yahweh's return, his homecoming and family reunion with his son Dode on Purim. That's essential. So why are these other two harvests along the way? 3 harvests, Bikurim, Shabuah, Towrah. Why would Shabuah be essential? It's looking over my shoulder there. It's the middle candle. And I can only think of very few reasons. Very few. One of those is that it is essential to know Yahweh's character as a father of children, since Shabuah is a harvest of firstborn children, to recognize that fathers don't like their sons and daughters to be in harm's way. And this is the beginning of the time of Yaakov's troubles when Shabuah will be fulfilled. 7 years before Yahweh's return, the Shabuah celebration 7 years before year 6000 Yah, and May, the 22nd of May, a Shabbat, of course, in 2026. And so that's an essential insight. Yahweh exists to remove his children from harm's way. There must be more. And there is. I think the single most important day on Yahweh's calendar, from perspective of creation and all eternity, is his return when his family is reconciled, because he doesn't have to deal with the irascible nature of his people any longer, or the harm that Goyim are perpetrating against his people. There's no more religion, no more politics, no more misappropriating his nature or misquoting him. And so this day of ideal harmony with those he chose to love has to be Yahweh's most favorite day in all of eternity. And this day does not occur without the mission that I was asked to perform. Now, that doesn't mean I deserve credit. It means that exactly what I said. If Yahweh had not engaged after a very long time, after longer than 2,000 years of complete silence, to speak to his people once again, they would not have known his name. They would not have known his son. They would not know the terms and conditions of the covenant. They would not know that God is returning. They would not know any date along the way. They would not understand the Moed Mikre. They would not be in attendance on Yom Kippurim. And without an audience in attendance on Yom Kippurim, there is no return. And if there is no return, God's already told us the planet would be destroyed. So a lot is writing on this. That would make it pretty essential. If you can tie what Yahweh chose to do collaboratively through me, and don't get all uppity and say, why would God choose to work through someone as ridiculous as you? Well, you can ask him, of course. You can read the thousands of prophecies where he explained why, as another alternative. You can also question why you weren't available, why God constantly revealed that he looked and could find not a single Israelite willing to listen to him and respond to him for thousands of years. And with no one to listen to him, there was no one to act. There was no one to reintroduce his name, his son, the covenant, the Mikre, the timeline, so that you'd be there. That's why he did it. I have no problem if you would prefer that he chose someone else, but what good would that do you? He chose Dod. You chose Shaul, Saul. What good did that do you? He chose Moshe. The children of Israel preferred Aaron. What good did that do you? Yahweh chose the covenant relationship, and yet Israel chose their religions. What good did that to you? It's time we recognize that you told your God, Yahweh, to go away and shut up, that you didn't want to hear from him again, which means that his only option now in speaking to you was through people that he would inspire and communicate through. This is where you are. Stop fighting it. Let go of the lies. Embrace the truth. So if there is a connection between Shabuah and the role that Yahweh has asked me to play on your behalf, then that would be what is most essential. Because without this collaboration, there is no hope for Israel, humankind, or the planet. And in this regard, you have some clues. One is that there are more prophecies regarding this particular role than almost anything in the Torah and prophets. Some of the titles afforded to it are meaningful. Yada, one who knows. Choder, a stem off the main branch, who is Dode. Bashar, herald. But it's also a corporeal individual who serves as a herald, and one whose corporeal body is going to serve in other ways. Just as Dode's did, so will mine. His is the Passover lamb, mine as the Adamah Parah. All of these things are clues. How about when you told God you didn't want to hear from him again, and he proclaimed that I would be his coal voice? Or most of all, the realization that according to the Torah and prophets, there are three Zeroah: Moshe, Dode, and the role that I have been asked to play on your behalf. And a Zeroah, in this case, is one who cultivates the seeds that have been sown for a productive harvest, which is why the Adamah Parah is the man of the earth who is Parah, productive and fruitful. Yes, indeed. There are lots of things to identify all of this with. And the fact that I was called to highlight the importance of that candle in the middle and to serve as the voice of and the life of Towrah, the one that welcomes Dode back. So there is a tie-in here. And I think that is largely what makes it so essential. And there is also every indication that it is because it does take a team of people to get things done, particularly today. You know, I was asked by Yahweh back in December to stop writing books, that I had written enough. One more book wasn't going to make much of a difference. But it's time for me to be the subtotal of those books and to start speaking to God's people. Now, writing books and getting them published does require a team. You need a publisher, you need editors, you need fact checkers, you need website builders and others to support that effort. You can't do all things. You can focus on the main thing, the one thing that you alone have been asked by God to achieve. Same thing is true now. I'm sitting here looking at you, doing a live stream, a stream of this program, because it is the one thing that only I can do at this time. It is my purpose. But to do this well, I can't do all of the other things that are necessary for this message to be disseminated broadly and to reach you in the most credible fashion possible. And so we need a team. And it's a lot of work. It pays nothing but eternal life in God's presence. The inheritance plan is, yes, marvelous, but it takes a lot of devotion. And so I think Yahweh realizes that how much he can expect from us, and knows that there has to be a day that we are all moving towards and trying to accomplish everything possible between now and that time to leave a lasting record of what's going to occur and why, and how you need to respond, Yisrael. And I think it's also important that since I will be joining Elia, I laugh, since I'll be joining Elia, of course, every Jew knows that Elia is returning. They know that he is one of the two last witnesses. It's written all over. Well, he's only named in one place in the last chapter of the last revelation that God made to humankind through the prophet Malachi. But it's clear from Zechariah that he's one of two. And the very fact that Yahweh would choose him, it's just hard to fathom the stupidity of the Jewish religion, where they set a place for Elia at the Passover table, not knowing the one thing that made Elia famous. There's only one thing that Elia did that distinguishes him, and it distinguishes him in a magnificent way. He was the most overt voice against religion, as well as politics, in the history of Israel. He denounced the religion and the political leadership of Israel in an exceedingly sarcastic manner. More than 850 to 1 were the religious clerics of Asherah and Baal, the Lord and the mother god that is venerated now in Christianity. And he prevailed. And he did so magnificently with such great oratory that Yahweh chose him to come back to reprise that exact same role. He will serve as the master of ceremonies when another bull, Yada, the Adam of Parah, is sacrificed, with Yahweh once again igniting the fire. A fire that will singe the last remnants of politics and religion, militarism, conspiracy, and yet will purify along with the ash-laden torrents of living waters that will cascade off the Temple Mount as this whole thing is orchestrated so beautifully by Elia and prepares the children of Israel, this mortal remnant, on the 24th of September to the backdrop of a full solar eclipse in year 2033, 10 days before Yahweh's returned with his beloved son, as is foretold in Zechariah 12. That's why Elia was chosen. That's why he was taken. That's why he is returning. He is the most outspoken person against religion and its integration into politics in the history of Israel. Something to think about, isn't it? And the man who will stand by his side during the last 3.5 years will be the only man in the history of the world who has written volumes to denounce Christianity, Islam, and Judaism by turning their own words against them, by comparing their words to the Word of God. Something else to think about, isn't it? And so to prepare that final witness, because, Elia, he is my companion here. He will have had 2,888 years to get recharged for this particular event. I think it's reasonable that Yahweh would provide a sabbatical for me to not just recharge, but prepare for the fullness of the mission that precedes his return. I would think that would make this day essential too. Lots of reasons for it. Recognizing that it is the last off-ramp before the time of Israel's troubles. Recognizing that This is a bright line fulfillment of prophecy that no one should miss. And recognizing that by harvesting this ingathering of standing grain, of those who are still standing upright and contributing to this covenant family on behalf of Israel at this moment and time, Yahweh assures success. He is assured that there will be those who love Israel, who love him, who know him, who admire his son, who are there at the homecoming on Yom Kippurim. And that makes it especially essential. The Mikra of Shabuah is so marvelous in so many ways. This continues. You should not endeavor to perform or accomplish any of the work of the Malakah. This is a eternal prescription for living in all of your dwelling places and homes throughout all generations. Called out Leviticus Kara 23:21. All right, so what in the world is a Malakah? Because you're not supposed to do any of the work of the Malakah. We're supposed to allow the Malakah to do as is needed. So, well, let's consider Malak, because Malakah is simply the feminine of Malak. What is Malak in Hebrew? It means spiritual messenger. It means heavenly envoy. The beings that are miscast as angels because of the Greek New Testament translating Malak to Agelos, and then Nimrods out there with no functioning brain cells, transliterating the Greek as opposed to translating either the Hebrew or the Greek, have created as angels. Well, that's who they would be. They are Malak, spiritual beings, God's messengers, his envoys. It makes them exceedingly important to us. So, Malak being a spiritual messenger, a Malakah would be a feminine manifestation of that message. So, what are we to make of that? Well, God has the ability to project his Ruach, although this doesn't say anything about Ruach, and his Ruach conveys both feminine and maternal aspects of his nature. So I guess that's a possibility, right? But I think that the best translation of Malakah would simply be spiritual counselor, spiritual messenger. So you should not endeavor to perform any aspect of the messenger, the heavenly messenger even. In fact, that might even be a better term, heavenly messenger, spiritual counselor. Well, who is the heavenly messenger, spiritual counselor at this time? Why this admonition? Something has dawned on me, and this is the beauty of being able to do a live broadcast like this. It's one of the reasons that I'm so grateful for having written all of these books and having gradually over time learned what Yahweh wants us to know and put the pieces of his puzzle together, because with each day you add to your base of knowledge, which then increases your capacity for understanding. And I'm going to share something with you that I've never shared before. I think that to a very large degree, Yahweh has asked me to serve as the Malakah. I am the messenger for this day. And you might say, oh, well, man, it's not fair because you're a dude and Malaka is feminine. Well, so is Zeroah, which is the most important of Dodes, who is a dude's title. Now, it doesn't really care about whether he calls you an Ed, restoring witness, or an Ida, restoring witness with masculine or feminine characteristics. By adding the sound to it, he may be speaking of this transition that he has asked me to make quite recently. We've just finished a series called In the Garden, where Yahweh makes it very clear that there is a distinction between Adam and Towrah, and the distinction is head and heart. That Towrah, feminine, would be guided by her heart, led by her passions, motivated by her heart, her feelings. And that man, for the most part, would be guided by his thoughts. And now you look at the difference between Malak and Malaka and these books that I wrote versus this program now where I'm addressing you. I had this conversation just an hour or so ago with one of my friends who was visiting, and yeah, he's listening to all of these programs, which is pretty unique for someone who lives on this tiny island with me. And we were talking about, he was bringing up how much more powerful the spoken word is than the written word, that he for years has tried to read the books and, got into them, and it was just difficult. But he says, I can listen to every word that you speak because of the inflection, the power of the spoken word, and things that you can communicate through the spoken word that you cannot communicate at all through the written word. And, I tried to back down a little bit, and I said, the written word is a much more effective means of educating because it is enduring. If you want to convey an enduring message, you need to put it in writing, which is what Yahweh did. And he says, but, today with your Facebook presentations, your YouTube and X and the like, where you're live streaming, Rumble, Odyssey now, you are in a position where the spoken word is enduring. So now the spoken word is actually more powerful. It does everything the written word can do and much more. People can look at your expression. They can hear the tone of your voice. They know that you are speaking the truth to them. They know that they can trust you. Much more powerful. And what I realized when he was speaking that, and I shared with him, I said, the difference really is that the written word is all up here. You process it all mentally. There's no emotional tug. It's all cerebral. Spoken word is passion. It grabs us in the heart. And so it's a far more feminine appeal. And today, I would say that the vast majority of people have a difficult time devoting the attention span required to read. But they love the spoken word, particularly when it's delivered with some sense of enthusiasm and passion, conviction. And so this is a message of God for our time, being delivered by God's chosen Malaka. As we have gone from the Malaka of these books to the Malaka of these words. Let me share one other thing with you. The one thing that makes me different than everyone and anyone who has ever lived. One thing. You read it in the 11th chapter of Yeshaya. As the Choder, I have the benefits of Yahweh's 7 spirits, his 7 Ruach. The Ruach is a feminine noun. And see, one soul, empowered, impassioned, emboldened, enlightened, with 7 Ruach, makes that soul, which, by the way, is feminine in Hebrew, empowered by the Ruach, feminine in Hebrew, a feminine manifestation of Malach. And it becomes prophetic because we had a breakaway group that, we had a psychopath at the center of it who maneuvered herself in a position where she could glom onto and mislead, abuse, beguile people who I thought were essential to this mission, who now are gone and aren't even missed. But she did that, claiming and them publicly announcing that they were refuting what I was saying, because what I was saying was deadly, because I wasn't giving enough credence to Spirit Mom. Well, there is no Spirit Mom. Yahweh's one. Yahweh's our Father. There's no second person with whom responsibilities are delegated, who has a unique voice, who ought to be venerated uniquely. And yet, no one in human history had ever distinguished the feminine attributes associated with Ruach, spirit, to the extent that I had, and explained how these feminine attributes of Ruach were part of the nature of Yahweh. I know the Spirit well, and I've shared those insights with you. And so now, this has a double purpose. It's telling this recklessly embittered and rebellious group that you ought to back down. Don't ever try to perform or accomplish any of the work of the Malaka. Yahweh chooses through whom he is going to speak, and there is a lot at stake. His people's souls are at stake. Yisrael is at stake. His son's reputation is at stake. He is warning all who would challenge this to stand down. Do not endeavor to do the work that Yahweh has chosen to do through his chosen implement, his Malaka, through his Ruach. And it also tells you that there is work being performed here, identifying that center candle once again and Shabuah with this particular mission, which is why it is essential. Because this is the last time that Yahweh is reintroducing his name to his people, reacquainting his people with his beloved son, Dod, and presenting them with a proper understanding of the Bereth covenant, the Mikre invitations to meet, and the timeline so that they are prepared. I am therefore heaven's messenger, your spiritual counselor. And of this, God says, this is an eternal prescription for living in all of your dwelling places and homes throughout all generations. It is. And when God speaks of 1,000 generations, that is thousands of years beyond the 6,000 that have transpired between humanity's expulsion from the garden and our re-entry to it. And therefore, there will be so many more generations to come because of what Yahweh has chosen to do with his Malakah, as this mortal remnant of Yisrael is spared. And it is by preparing Yah's final Zeroah for this mission, just as he prepared Dod. When Dod served as the Pesach El, it was not at the end of his first life. I am certain, as much as I respect my king, my brother, my Messiah, recognizing his words and deeds towards the end of his 70-year life, he didn't have it in him to give what was required to serve as the Passover lamb. Just didn't. It had been a rough life, with his own son rebelling against him, a battle against the Philistines. All of 66 battles he had to fight protecting Yisrael. And so Dod could not have done it without the break. His was 1,000 years. It was a big mission. He had to actually take our guilt into Sheol. Big damn mission. And so Yahweh enabled him to recharge. Yahweh enabled him to prepare for this essential mission over that 1,000 years. And Shabuah is this opportunity to accomplish the same thing, because I'm the one of only two people asked to lay down my bashar to save God's people. And I have to tell the 7 Ruach to depart from me. I have to tell all of the Malak that are protecting me to stand down. And then I have to allow the corporeal manifestation of the spirit that I have thwarted with my books against Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, and with this message calling Yisrael back home, Hasatan, the adversary. I have to allow him to bludgeon me to death so that Yahweh can use the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah to prepare his people for his return, just as he prepared his people for the Exodus and the journey to the Promised Land 3,400 years ago, and then prepared them to live in his company 2,000 years ago through his son's fulfillment of Pesach. And so I'm going to return not as the pure mortal man inspired with the 7 Ruach of Yahweh that you are listening to and looking at this moment, but as a Malakah, as a heavenly messenger alongside Elia. Even the names are interesting. Yada, Elia. No, Yahweh is God. So this is the Chukah, the clearly communicated and inscribed inscription that cuts us in to life in the family, and so that we can dwell for all generations with our God. That's a lot to process. I think we'll conclude this program at this point. I thank you for listening. May Yahweh reach your soul. May you choose to embrace your God's name. Come to appreciate his beloved Son and what he has done for you. Join us on the Shabuah harvest. Return with us to celebrate God's great reenactment of what Elia did so long ago on Towrah, so that we can all celebrate Yom Kippurim, this father and son return, and then camp out with our Heavenly Father for the next 1,000 years on Sukkah. Thank you for listening to the YAHOWAH blog. I am Yada, your host, Craig Winn.